And I am going to share my screen and we will start the exciting part here, which is the PowerPoint presentation. Before we get started with this, I just wanted to give you all an overview of how our speaking requests come in and what happens at the administrative level. So how it works is that an organization will call into the office or send an email, and I will talk to them about what they're interested in terms of a presentation. If it's virtual, if it's in person, our general presentation goes over a little bit about the league. We talk about voter registration, we talk about voting options, and then we talk about nonpartisan voting resources. This presentation that I'm going to go through is longer than you would ever get through on one of our public speaking opportunities. It includes different areas that you might not speak to about, certain groups. So there's about 4 or 5 slides about the league. You may only include one. Or for example, I did a presentation to an OSU student group and they were really interested in learning about the league as an organization. And so I had more information about that. And then I took out a lot of the information about voter registration because they were a voting group and they already knew all that information. So a lot of this you will change based on who your audience is. And I also want to say that a lot of it is based on your own speaking style. So when I have a Zoom presentation that I'm presenting, I tend to use more slides just because there tends to be less public participation from the audience. But if I'm in person, I actually like to just use a few slides and then have some handouts that I can pass around and make it more of a conversation style. So I guess what I'm saying is that I want you to tailor this to your own speaking style, what you're comfortable with. Because our goal in this presentation is to, one, get the name of the League of Women Voters out there to different community groups, let them know that we are a place where you can go to get nonpartisan voter resources. We also just want to get more public participation in elections. So just by talking to groups about an upcoming, for example, I have this presentation about the upcoming primary election. You're letting people know that, hey, we have an election this May. It's a primary. This is how you vote in a primary. That's really important. One thing that I want to stress before we get into this is that all of our presentations with the community speaking group are nonpartisan and they are not advocacy based. So for example, we would normally go over issues that are going to be on the ballot for May. Now we don't know what those are going to be yet, so I don't have anything in there about them. But several years ago, we had a issue about redistricting that was on the ballot, and the league had a position about it. We were in favor of it. But when we went out to the community and we did these speaking presentations, we just talked about the issue, but in a very neutral way. We didn't advocate that they vote for or against it, just like we would never advocate for someone to vote for or against a specific candidate. We're really mostly interested in answering voters' questions about the election process, how to vote, if they have concerns, for example, about election security. Sometimes people have concerns about pending legislation. Just being a resource for people to ask questions, I think, is the most important part. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about that? Okay, so I talk to the community groups, get the details on what they're interested in. I'll send out an email to everyone that's interested or said that they're interested in doing presentations and with the details, and then you can get back to me if you're interested or not. I will echo what Anne said in that I highly recommend tag teaming presentations and partnering up, whether it's in person or virtual. It just gives you a little breathing room. It also helps if you don't know an answer to the question, someone else can step in. And it's just a good way to like collaborate. So without further ado, let's see. I put this on Google Slide, and I will share all of this with you afterwards. So this is the agenda that we would have for a fairly generic, speaking event, which would be about the league, voter registration, voter options, and nonpartisan resources. So a little bit about the league, and some of you are experts in the league history, and some of you probably don't know much at all, and that's fine. We were founded in 1920, so in February, we will actually be 102 years old. We were founded for the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. And our early goals were to help women learn how to register to vote and get them information about voting. So part of the idea was to encourage women to become independent voters apart from their husbands and other family members, and encourage them to also get involved in the political process by running for office, and just have a women-led group that provided this information. And then I always like to stress in a presentation that we are nonpartisan and we never support or oppose candidates or political parties. And part of the reason that we are often invited to speak at various community groups is because of this nonpartisan status. So it's really important that we make sure that in the presentation that we're coming off as nonpartisan. Sometimes you will get a question about how can the league have positions on legislation and advocate for, certain positions and be nonpartisan. Does anyone want to take a crack at answering that? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute.
I always use I always quote the director of the Ohio League of Women Voters. Her name is Jen Miller, and she always says, "We are fiercely nonpartisan." She says that during radio interviews. She says it, in print interviews all the time. And I believe her when she says that because she's fierce. And she's fiercely nonpartisan. And what I have learned in the years I've been going to meetings, back when we could all see each other face to face, was that when the league takes a position, whether it's a local league, the state league, or the national league, we don't jump into something. We talk about it and we study it and we take a position on it. So it's not a hasty, I feel this way about this and these people are terrible. No, it's let's look at it and let's think about it, and then we come to a consensus. And isn't that a lovely old-fashioned term?
Thanks, Barbara. That's a great answer. Yeah, I usually say something similar in that we are nonpartisan and that we don't support candidates and we don't oppose candidates. But we do have positions and on various issues, but we're able to kind of coexist. There's two different arms of the league, and when we're doing voter education and voter outreach, we are advocating for people's right to vote. So, Joanne, did you have a question?
Yes, so I am a little confused. I understand about candidates and political parties, but why do we pick a position on an issue if we don't advocate for it?
Oh, we do advocate for that. So,
Okay.
for example, right now we have a study going on in the Ohio League about criminal justice. And at the end of the study, we're going to have a statement go around to all the different leagues that say, this is what the study committee came up with, and these are their positions about criminal justice that take specific positions, but they're not political positions. It's just an issue that we've studied extensively, and we have come to agreement in terms of where the league stands on that position. So we do lobby, and we do have we do have positions and we act on them. So I just wanted to bring that up because the league does tend to have, well, some people view the league as having more liberal, progressive leanings when it comes to issue stances. But when we're doing voter work, we're doing voter work. We just want people to be registered to vote and vote. We don't care how you vote.
So when you go to one of these public speaking events and there is an issue on the ballot, maybe the league took a position on it. Are we supposed, if someone asks us, do we speak on that issue?
If someone asks if we have taken a position, then you say yes or no. But even if we take a position on it, we publish something that's called a pro and con statement, and I have an example of that in the presentation. And what that is a non-partisan description of the issue with different pro bullets and different con bullets. So we have that information for any issue. Usually I just don't even say if the league has taken a position on a particular issue. I just talk about it very neutrally. But if someone asks, then you should always, say yes or no. Tiffany, do you have a question?
If people ask,
yes.
Then we should say if that is okay.
Yeah.
I guess I just wanted maybe check and make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. You would say, yes, we took in this position, or no, we haven't taken this position. But as far as how you can choose to advocate for policy while being nonpartisan, I guess you could respond. I might be inclined to respond, and you could say if this would be appropriate, I guess, is something to the effect of not all policy is political. And while the league is a nonpartisan group, there are policy issues that we choose to advocate for or against. And those aren't always partisan, but they are more policy issues. Is that fair?
Yes, that's a great way to say it. And you can also say that, we choose our positions on public policy issues, irregardless of how the political parties feel about different issues. So we don't, say, oh, the Republicans feel this way, so we should agree. We're making our own decisions based on that. And this doesn't come up very often, but sometimes, people will ask you about the lobbying that we do, especially because we've been in the news a lot this year with redistricting and really advocating for and against, mostly against bills that have been up in the Ohio State House. So, okay, let's get back. Ooh, now I'm. Sorry, I am. Okay. Let me get back to sharing. Okay, so here's the league's mission. And I usually talk about how, we're a volunteer group and we have 3 different tiers. We have Ohio, and we have the national, and we are the Columbus League. And then if you have a group that's interested in the league as an organization and finding out more, you can talk about a couple of our committees, which are, one is education and advocacy, and here I listed some of the areas that they're focusing on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just letting you know. And then this slide is about our voter service, which is kind of our bread and butter here at the local level. And this gives some of the activities that we did last year. Okay, so those are the slides about the league. This kind of gets more into, I would say, more of a discussion that you can have with the audience about why do we vote? Why is it important? So this slide talks about what voting affects, and you can kind of break it down national, state, and local. Have people think about the fact that, maybe they think there should be a traffic light at this intersection near where they live. Well, when you think about that, that is related to voting because perhaps that's something the city council can be working on in your town. So really just having a discussion about why people think voting is important. Okay, this is I hope you can see this whole thing. I might have to fix this slide a little bit, but this is a great little exercise that you can do. It is a little harder to do online, but if you're in person, it works really well. And what it shows is how few people actually vote and how you, maybe as a non-voter, are trusting this small portion of voters to make decisions for you. We use this a lot in high schools and when talking to young voters, but it really works for any age. So at the end of the exercise, you're only going to have a third of the people in your presentation, in your audience members, that have their hands still up, meaning they voted and everybody else didn't vote. This is, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back and fix this slide because it did not come out correctly. But what this says when it comes out correctly is it shows the percentage breakdown of the generations in how many people, how they're making up the voting population. But I will go back and fix that because I don't know if I can talk about that very well without the labels on it. Oh no, here they go.
Just made it fancy.
Yeah,
Geez.
I forgot that it was a fancy one. Okay. So this one is, I like to use when I'm talking to younger voters, but you can use it for any, and it just shows, who's voting in our society. So we use this a lot to talk about to the younger generation, 18 to 24-year-olds, about really getting out there and voting and letting their voice be heard. Okay, this is a really great slide about election security. I'm not going to play the video, but there's about a 3-minute video that you can show from the Ohio Secretary of State that goes through their post-election audit process. And in 2021, their post-election audit showed a 99.9% accuracy in the counting of the ballots and in election administration. So it's a really nice consolidated resource that you can show your audience about what happens on the back end to make sure our elections are safe and secure, because there's a lot of information out there which say that our elections aren't safe, they're not accurate. So I think people kind of see these headlines and then start doubting the election process. And this video is really great in kind of just laying out exactly what all steps are in place to make sure that people's votes are counted accurately and that the results are accurately presented to the public. Does anyone have questions about that?
So, Elizabeth, that's a short video from Secretary of State LaRose.
Correct.
Then
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
All right. His when he spoke to, gosh, the Ohio League has that lunching with the league
Mhm.
program. He spoke for a whole hour and talked about how secure the election had been and how the results were tested. And I think that just goes to show, first of all, he was invited to speak to everyone in the Ohio League, and he's a Republican, for those of you who didn't know. And he was talking in very nonpartisan terms, totally nonpartisan. People worked hard. We tested the
Yes.
results. And it was just really impressive. So our elections are secure,
Yes.
is essentially what he was saying. And so anyone who says, you know, I had one person say, well, it's the Ohio League of Liberal Voters instead of women voters. And so, yeah.
Yes. So that's why I wanted to put in this video from the Secretary of State themselves, and not just from the league, to kind of show from the government's point of view what's being done behind the scenes. I think that that's important. And a lot of people don't know the details of what happens, you know, behind the scenes. Let's see. Oh my. Okay. This is the last slide I have that talks about kind of the current situation of people being unsure about why they should vote on election security and that type of those type of topics. I wanted to put in a little bit of something about what does the league do in terms of voting rights advocacy. So we support passage on the national level of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which you all know the Congress tried to pass, was it last week, and could not do due to filibuster rules. But we support having national voting rights standards in place. We also oppose state legislation that has been circulating for the last several years that would decrease voting access and put up barriers to voting in specific communities. So for example, in 2021, there were state laws passed in Georgia and Texas, as well as numerous other states, which would decrease voting access for many voters. So we are opposed to those. We also in Ohio are advocating for some very specific voter rights legislation, and that would be, this is kind of our wish list of things we wish would happen, and that would be automatic voter registration. That means that, for example, if you went to the BMV and got a driver's license, you'd be automatically registered to vote during that transaction. So instead of us having to go around with paper voter registration forms and ask everyone to fill them out to register to vote, there'd be a much more automatic process that people could get registered to vote. Another thing on our wish list that we're advocating for is online absentee ballot applications. Currently, if you want to receive an absentee ballot, you need to fill out a paper form and mail it or turn it in person to the Board of Elections office. And then third, we are going to be advocating this year for additional early vote drop boxes across counties. Last year, we had one drop box per county, and usually that was in the parking lot of the Board of Elections office, which is helpful, but doesn't address the issue that many counties are large and people have to drive, 20, 30 minutes sometimes to get to their Board of Elections office. So this is just a slide that gives you some background on what the league is working on advocacy-wise for voting rights. But now we're going to switch gears a little bit to some of the nitty gritty nuts and bolts about voting. And if you are signed up for the voter registration training I'm doing next week, we're going to go over all this in a lot more detail. But for presentation purposes, I'm just going to kind of speed right through this and let you know what people are interested in generally when we talk about voting and voter registration from a mechanics point of view. So people are generally interested in talking a little bit about who can vote. Most people know that you have to be a US citizen, you have to be an Ohio resident to vote in Ohio. A couple things people don't know or may not know is that if you are not currently serving time for a felony conviction, you are eligible to vote. And if you previously served time for a felony conviction and you are now out of prison or jail, you need to re-register to vote in order to vote in the upcoming election. The other area I like to talk about, especially when we're doing primary elections, is that if you are going to turn 18 by, and this should say, I will change this, if you are turning 18 by the general election date in November, you can vote in November, but you can also vote in the May primary. So I have a little bit more information about this further on because we are dealing with a primary election coming up. But that means if someone's going to be turning 18 on October 5th of 2022, they can get registered to vote right now and vote in the primary election, because for the primary election, we're only deciding which party candidates are going to face off against each other. So the final decision on that candidate race won't be made until November, in which that voter will be 18 by. Okay, so this slide is talking about timing of voter registration. I'm going to preface this by saying that because of the redistricting process that we're in which we still don't know exactly what the maps are going to look like, this could throw off dates for the primary election. There is pending legislation that may move the primary election to June. And there is also pending legislation that may change when the candidate filing deadline is for the primary election. So if that's the case, these dates are all going to change. But for now, I just put in kind of placeholder events of dates of what we know right now. So the primary election is May 3rd. Deadline to register is April 4th. If you register after April 4th, that will allow you to participate in the November 8th, 2022 general election. I then go through your options for voter registration. And I just briefly touch on this because when you're out there doing voter registration in person and not a presentation, you want to walk through, all the different lines in the form, make sure they understand the information. But when you're presenting, you really just want to let people know that you can register online at voteohio.gov, or you can fill out a paper registration form. And if you're presenting in person, you'll have these voter registration forms with you. Or if you're presenting via Zoom, you can say you can print them out on the County Board of Elections website. You can get them at your local library. There's a lot of different places you can find the form. You can also verify if you're registered or not by doing this very easy voter search on the Ohio Secretary of State's website. All you have to do is put in your first name, your last name, and your county, and it'll show if you're currently registered to vote. So that's all I say about voter registration, unless people have specific questions, which sometimes they do. But next I go into what the different voting options are in 2022. And this is really where people have more questions. So you have 3 options for voting: Election Day, early in person at the Board of Elections office, or mail in absentee ballots. And here I put in all the dates, but again, just an asterisk that this could be changing, but for now, these are the dates that we're working with. The questions you will get about voting will most likely have to do with absentee ballot applications. If someone wants to vote absentee, paper ballot for the primary election, they will have to fill out a request form. And like I said, those are not electronic, so you'll have to print out the form, mail it into the Board of Elections office. The Board of Elections will receive that form and they will mail you a paper ballot that you can fill out and then return either via mail or in person to the Board of Elections. Any questions about absentee ballots? If you come to the voter registration training, I'm going to go over a lot more information about absentee ballots, but just for purposes of this, I was summarizing. Okay, the next area that we get a lot of questions on during a primary is political party enrollment. What does it mean to be a registered Republican or a registered Democrat here in Ohio? Well, in Ohio, there's no such thing as a registered Democrat or registered Republican. What people mean when they ask that question is that your political party affiliation can be known through your voter record of what primary election ballot you request when you vote in the primary. So when you go to vote on primary election day or before, if you do those earlier options, they will ask you if you would like a Republican ballot, a Democrat ballot, or an issues only ballot. And then your choice gets recorded in your voter file, which is public record. So when a voter is voting during the primary election, they will only be voting on a single party candidates. They won't be deciding any candidate race. Those will be decided in November. Any questions on political party ballots and things like this? Sometimes the different presentations that I do can get a little sidetracked here, because then people will want to talk about the effects of gerrymandering and how primaries have become really important now in certain districts, because districts are so gerrymandered that whoever wins the primary is really the winner of the general race, because one party has so much the balance of power is so skewed in some areas. So you'll get some kind of political questions like that. It's fine to talk about how the league is against gerrymandering and how we're working to have fair districts. And that is one of our goals and one of our main focuses to fight against gerrymandering. Okay, so what's on the ballot this coming primary election? I don't have a lot of specific information for you yet. As the filing deadline passes, I will have specific information about what candidates are going to be on the ballot and what issues. So right now we don't know. This is a very specific slide that I did for, I can't think of who it was now, but it was for a community group that was based in Ohio Senate District 15 and Ohio House District 18. So it has this information. It's really nice if you know the community group that you're speaking for, that you can put this very specific information in your presentation. So if you find out you're doing a presentation in Dublin, you'd want to look up who their Ohio Senate, what their Ohio Senate district is, and who their Ohio House representative is. But again, we don't even know really where the district lines are at this point. So that makes things a little uncertain. And people may want to talk about that a little bit too in presentations. But there will be more details as we get closer to the election. Okay, this is an important part of the presentation, and we also will have handouts with this information because I don't expect people to remember where to go to get good resources for candidates, issues, and voting information. The first thing I always talk about is Vote 411. That is a National League of Women Voters site that has nonpartisan candidate and issue guides. We don't have one up yet for the primary, but we will. My goal is always to have that up about 6 weeks before the election. So that will be live hopefully by the end of March. But again, it really depends on when the filing deadlines are and when we know where the lines are going to be drawn for the districts. But Vote 411 gives nonpartisan issue descriptions and also has questions that we put to candidates and they answer in their own words. We have voting 1, 2, 3 cards, which I have here. This is an example from 2020, but we have hard copy ones, which you would get copies of. And this is my #1 handout that I give because it has all the important dates, it has early voting hours, it has a list of voter resources, and it talks to you about how to vote, what kind of voter ID you need. So I make sure everyone gets one of these. And then I also go over our pro-con statements for issues that are going to be on the ballot. Now, I don't know what issues are going to be on the primary election ballot, but this is an example of a pro-con statement that we did back in maybe 2018 when the Franklin County Children's Services was passing a levy. We did a league explanation, which really just talks about how much can you expect to pay as a homeowner for this levy. And then we did arguments in support and arguments again. So if you are presenting, you would go over this in detail and ask, kind of read through it and have people ask questions and things like that. Okay. Another resource, election protection. The league is going to be doing election protection work this year. There are several different arms to this. One is the 1-866 Our Vote hotline. That is something that voters call if they have problems voting. This is a nonpartisan nationwide toll-free hotline that is, it's staffed by lawyers on election day, but you can call it anytime and leave a message and someone will get back to you any day of the year. We are also going to be providing poll monitors during early vote and election day. And we are also going to be doing a lot of social media work about information on the election and election security. So that is a resource we want people to know about, because if people are having problems voting, we want them to report it so that we can follow up and so that we know what the problems are out there. So that's important to mention. Okay. Frequently asked questions. I put these in here because there are things that come up. I can let you all read through those and I'll give you a copy of the presentation so that you can look things over. One thing I wanted to mention is that do not have to be a voting rights expert or an expert on the mechanics of voting to be a community speaker. Really what you need to be comfortable speaking to groups, and you need to be a good listener and listen to people's questions and try your best to answer them. And if you don't know the answer, that's fine. You can say, let me follow up with Elizabeth. And okay, you go a second. Sorry, it's my daughter. Let me follow up with Elizabeth. And if you want to give me your contact information, she will get you the answer. But these are some questions that we get about who can vote. Some questions. These are more questions that we get at voter registration events, but they still come up during community presentations. Okay, this is a good slide for how an individual can get involved. The best way to have an impact on the election system, in my opinion, is to be a poll worker. That's run through the Franklin County Board of Elections, and they need about almost 6,000 poll workers to staff and operate polling locations in Franklin County every election day. So elections are really, we depend on, I'm going to call them volunteers because they get paid almost nothing. They're run by community members and volunteers that think that our voting system is important, and they dedicate a very long day to make sure that the elections run smoothly. And then you can also, of course, join the league and be part of our outreach for voter registration and election protection. I don't want that, I don't think. Okay, and then we just have a thanks kind of follow up. So it was hard putting together this PowerPoint because each presentation is a little bit different. And like I said, each speaker is different, and you may want to include some information or not enough and not others. Or you may think, hey, I really want to include more information about what's been going on currently with misinformation about how our elections are run, or state laws that have been passed that disenfranchise voters. And we can do that. It can be styled to fit a particular group or a speaker. So I know it's 8 o'clock now. I don't want to hold people, but I am certainly willing to answer questions or comments that you all have. I did this training a little early in the year. We don't usually get lots of requests for speakers in January and February because people are not thinking about voting right now. It's often in the several months leading up to a primary or to the general election that we have most of our speaking requests. But I wanted to get people on board now, or interested now, so that I have a pool of people to call upon. So questions or comments?
Just a quick question. Do you send like a general email out asking for if people are available, or how does that kind of work once you start getting speaker requests?
So if you're interested in being on the speakers group email, I do send an email out to everyone saying, we've received a speaking request. It's for 2 Thursdays from now at 6 p.m. at this location, and they're interested in these topics. So it's kind of a first come, first serve process. If I know that someone is interested in specific topics or has a specialty that they like to speak about, I do sometimes contact people individually, but any other questions?
Elizabeth, what kind of groups get in touch with you about speakers? Do they run the gamut from one thing to another, or what kind? What?
That's a good question. We have sometimes it will be, well, I should say my next speaking request is for the Marion Franklin Community Center, and it's on February 24th at 12:30, and I will send that out in case anyone wants to come and help or just watch if you're interested in seeing. This will be an in-person presentation. So this is the Marion Community Center. We have senior centers are a big one. We have colleges that reach out and want to have a student group will want to have a speaker. We have So one of my volunteers, Bridget McDaniel, every year she does a presentation to the, I forget the acronym right now, but it's the Ohio Council for the Blind. So she does a presentation to voters who have vision impairments. And that's obviously a kind of a specialized one, but it does, it does run the gamut. And some years, like last year, we didn't get as many requests because it wasn't a big election year and people just aren't thinking about that. But on even number of years, I can usually expect to have a fairly steady stream of speaking requests.
Do we need to let you know, Elizabeth, if we want to go watch a presentation and just to, kind of learn from watching one? To just
Yeah.
observe?
So I will include this information that I have about this upcoming presentation. And if you want to come watch, you're welcome to. You can just let me know in an email if you, would like to come, and you're welcome to do that. And you're welcome to, in the future, tag team if you like, or, just assist. Some people like to do certain parts of the presentation, but not others. So we're really willing to work with whatever you're willing to offer.
Elizabeth, I put this in the chat, but I'm willing, so let me know. I'd love to come. It's Ronisia, and
Alicia.
watch, shadow, and then present at some point in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you. And as most of you know, once you've done it a couple times, it just gets to be routine. And people are generally very friendly. They're so glad that you're there and you've taken the time to talk to them a little bit about voting. So, if an organization has contacted us looking for a speaker, they're usually a pretty friendly audience. But also, if you have an organization that you're a part of, or that might be interested in having someone come out to speak about what's going to be on the ballot or about voting, please let me know, because we would always like to expand our program.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's helpful to have a basic module that we all know that we can tailor according to the audience or what our own knowledge base is. And it's a good beginning. Thank you very much.
Yes, it's hard doing this training because it's like if you were speaking to maybe some of your clients, I know you would want to have some different information in there. Sure. So if you are in that situation and you're talking to a specific group of voters that have specific needs, please let me know. And this presentation lives on a Google slide, so things can be taken off, put on. I'm going to update the dates. Yeah, don't feel like you have to just take a clunky PowerPoint that doesn't really fit your audience with you.
So, Elizabeth, I have a question about the Google Slides. I've done slides before. What are they called? PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
Is this kind of similar to that?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So what I do when I'm doing an actual presentation is I go into the Google Slides and I download it into a PowerPoint. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that way, if you're going to make specific changes that fit a very particular group that you're presenting to, you can just do that on your PowerPoint. And most people are more familiar with PowerPoint anyways, and you may just feel more comfortable using the PowerPoint. But this way, everyone can view these slides. And when I make updates, you can all see the changes.
So I have another question. If we do, let's say we're aiming it at a specific group. Like if I were talking to a group here in Westerville,
Mhm.
I would want to say Ohio District 19, House of Representatives, Senate District 3, let's say,
Right.
and then list who the current office holders were and so forth.
Yeah. And you may
Um,
have like a school levy on the ballot that someone in Grove City wouldn't have, so they would not be interested
Right.
in information. So that's why, you know, you'd want to make some changes whenever you're speaking to different groups.
So since we're acknowledged to be volunteers, but we're kind of representing the league, do you want to see what we do if we're going to modify something?
You know, if you are going to really make some substantial changes to the PowerPoint, I would want to see that. If you are just updating it so it reflects who Westerville elected officials are, that's fine. You know, I don't need to see that. We do want to present a unified message, though, in terms of what we're saying about voting in general, what we're saying about advocacy and voter rights that we're doing. But when it comes to just very community-centered issues, I think that's okay if you feel comfortable making those changes yourself.
I was wondering if there's anything, where are the bylaws are on the webpage, and is there anything about this in the bylaws?
About the
Presentations or making presentations or when speaking on behalf of the league in public, I guess.
Yeah. We don't have anything in our bylaws. The league is a unique organization in that we are grassroots and volunteer driven, and we don't have staff that are gonna go out and do most of this presentation. So the way we're structured is we just inherently put a lot of our trust in our volunteers. And I will say, if you are interested in being on the Speakers Bureau, you and I will have a relationship, and I will, know you, and, we'll feel comfortable working together. And we do have certain guidelines, but, like I said, it's probably a little looser than if you are used to working with other organizations that have a larger staff. Well, okay, I'm going to send something out tomorrow morning, so be on the lookout for an email. I am 100% open to follow-up questions. If you wanted to meet in person to kind of discuss some questions that you had or were unsure about certain things, I am willing to do that. I encourage all of you to, if you're interested in speaking for the league, to come and sit in on one of the presentations that we do. And I just thank all of you for your time and your interest in helping get out information about voting. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Just want to say one thing before we,
Sure.
can you,
You're muted again, Anne.
okay, can you hear me? I just want to again welcome Sean, and I'm looking for a mentor for him. So I put my information in the chat box. I'm trying to do my work at the same time here. So if any of you are interested in mentoring Sean, a wonderful new member, let me know. Just want to do my job while I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Okay, everyone. Look out for an email from me tomorrow, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you too.